think we can go ahead and get started now. Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you to all of our attendees that are joining us for our webinar on the state of Microsoft GP. My name is Travis Brooks, and I'm an account manager here at Kopis within our ERP division, and I'll also be your moderator today. If you're not familiar with Kopis, we were founded in 1999, and we are a Microsoft partner for our Dynamics Great Plains and Dynamics Business Central for any ERP implementation, customization, and support. We are also a provider for custom software development for internal and external applications for things like web, mobile, as well as business intelligence practice focused on SQL servers, data warehouses, and visualizing through dashboards like Power BI. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. We want this to really be less of a formal presentation and more of a conversation. So we welcome your participation and questions throughout the session. We'll be sending out a few polls for your feedback. And if you'd like to send in a question, feel free to do so via the chat function in Teams, and we'll address those items throughout the presentation. Or you can use the reactions icon on Teams to virtually raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask a question as well. Also, if you would like to schedule some time to strategize and talk further about where you see your company taking GP in the future, I'll post a link in the chat where you can view availability and schedule a meeting with the Copus team. We'll be more than happy to talk with you through those things. With those items out of the way, I'd like to introduce you to the General Manager of Copus ERP, Adam Drews. Adam, I'll pass it on to you, and thanks for taking us through the state of Microsoft GP.
All right, thanks, Travis. All right, let's get this. All right, today we're going to go through a few items. Introduce the team here with me today, but also like to tell you a little bit about kind of Microsoft's evolution in their mid-market platform. Mid-market being small, medium-sized businesses that they've been targeting for things like GP. We've got some facts that Microsoft has provided with regard to some of the GP timelines, updates you on the life cycle of GP, how that's changed, some of the things that we're seeing across our client base with regard to infrastructure, what Kopis is doing to support our GP clients, and then in along those lines, some common enhancements we've seen, especially as work has changed over the last couple of years. Our account team has grown. This is your account team for Kopis with regard to ERP. I lead the group. We've got two account managers, Heather and Travis, and they've been helping to field questions and help you get the most out of GP. So what we've seen in talking with companies, both within our client base as well as outside, is there's sort of three camps with regard to GP and cloud and any type of move. And there's no judgment here on which is better for anybody. Everyone makes their own decision, but we've seen a group of companies who said, we've invested in GP. GP is our platform, and we'd like to keep that as long as possible. Perfectly fine goal and kind of philosophy for where you want to go with GP. Some that are interested in cloud, but that don't have a definite path to moving to something like Business Central or anything else. And then those that are actively planning some kind of move. I'd say that in general, this webinar is mostly focused at the first and second one. Doesn't mean that there won't be valuable items within number 3, but I think this is really targeted at those two first groups. There'll be another webinar that we host not too long from now in July about the move to Business Central and kind of helping educate what that looks like. So as Microsoft defines their mid-market and as they call it SMB or SMC. It's those organizations that are under the enterprise level as far as either complexity or size or number of different factors. It's a gray distinction. We have some clients that, by revenue, annual revenue, are would squarely uh, land in the enterprise, but the usage of, say, a GP or a Business Central is simpler. And then we have the other extreme where we have complex manufacturers that are utilizing a ton of the functionality, and a smaller company that are kind of breaking at the door in certain areas. But overall, the two big uh, trends in the mid market have been cloud and subscription based. So historically, in the GP world and other other software world, we bought software and then we paid an annual maintenance. And then for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the primary means of purchasing software is a subscription model. And there's various reasons for that. One reason, the not so secret reason, is, well, companies are valued higher for subscriptions. Um, Other reasons are around the ability to support a smaller subset of configurations and hardware configurations and things like that. So there's a number of different reasons around that. It's, again, no secrets here. Microsoft has chosen Business Central as their main platform for the ERP space. So what we used to have, and we still do, but what if we looked at the historical product lineup for the mid-market space, Microsoft purchased Great Plains, Navision, and Solomon. They also purchased Exapta, but that was at the enterprise level. And these three ERP platforms served different types of companies, and also, they kind of roughly aligned to different markets as well, geographically. We saw NAV in the European market pretty heavily, GP in the US and English-speaking markets, Solomon in more projects-based organizations, especially in like the government contracting space. Um, all three of those platforms, if Microsoft could, you know, could kind of fish their wish right now, they'd love for all of their clients to be making the move to BC. Um, and the way that they are, the way that they go to market with Business Central. Sorry, you'll hear me say BC. The full name is Dynamics 365 Business Central. Because it's a mouthful, just like we did with Great Plains and Navision and Solomon, we've been creating that new acronym as we're wont to do. So sure, Microsoft does want their Great Plains clients and any of their other on-premise clients, they'd love for them to consider BC. Um, what we're architecting our services so that we can help in all three of the lanes that I described earlier. Those that want to stay on GP, we want to help support, getting the most out of GP for as long as you can. Those that want to consider a move, let's help strategize what the best path to that move is. Um, but Business Central is cloud first, so they actually release to the cloud before they release to on-premise. So every April and every October they release major versions, and then every month they release minor versions. The monthly versions just go straight out, and the two larger releases, which are like feature releases, which align to the GP October release that we see, or feature releases. Those are more of a scheduled, because they can have breaking changes where the other ones shouldn't. Um, Again, back into the what would Microsoft want? They are offering incentives. They're in the carrot phase of a move. We haven't seen too many sticks. I don't anticipate a ton of those. We'll talk about the modern life cycle and how that, um, I don't want to call it a stick, but that's something we need to plan for. Um, but you do have options to move if you are in that middle category, that considering a move, where you can pay for your GP licenses and get Business Central licenses. And then once you've move to Business Central, you'd get a 40% discount on your licenses. Nonprofits, unlike in GP, you have a pretty substantial discount for nonprofits that we're seeing across all of the services, the subscription services. Okay. Um, as far as timelines are concerned, uh, what we heard, so I was at the Directions Conference this April, and Mike Morton, who leads Business Central for Microsoft, he directly said, "We have, there's not some, you know, end of life date that they're keeping secret at Microsoft, and they're, only publicizing certain things. They've said, this is we're gonna continue to support GP as long as it makes business sense for Microsoft, and so they've put together a plan that essentially uh, is designed to give clarity around what their timeline means. So it's a little bit hard to see, but essentially, if the top four uh, the top four lines represent GP 2013, 2015, 2016, and 2018. So we used to have releases that aligned with the year that they were released. And so the way that fixed life cycle, that's what they described that licensing model, the way that fixed life cycle would work is, uh, you know, it would be in mainstream support until some period of time in the future, and then it would go into extended support. So the mainstream support is the dots that you see here in the middle, and then the extended support is the gray bar that represents when those extended support timelines end. Extended support is essentially high priority security fixes. Mainstream support is when they're still releasing things like tax updates and things like that. So we're seeing in this fixed life cycle, GP 2015 has ended its mainstream support. Same with 2013 ended mainstream support. GP 2016 just ended mainstream support last year, and 2018 will end mainstream support next year. So as long as you're on a supported version, Microsoft will continue to support by pushing updates to those versions. Obviously, security updates for a little bit longer. We can raise support tickets to Microsoft inside that mainstream support window, and then we have the modern lifecycle that I'll talk about in just a minute. And this is not so you notice they say and beyond. So there's no, this isn't the end date. What do I expect? What am I seeing already with regard to releases? And I suspect that some of you are already seeing this as well. Releases in general aren't quite as big as they used to be. Some of the releases are maybe what I would, and some good things is that we'd see some kind of fan favorites. Like there's a copy paste for payables that was released. It was small but really helpful. And then we're seeing some kind of keeping up with the latest larger trends within the Office and no 365 space, for instance, like TLS support for sending for connecting to Exchange Online and sending email. We're seeing things to keep up with the changes in Office as they deprecate some things that they're no longer supporting. So some of those have been a little bit painful to some of you and us, and we've been trying to keep up to date with all those small changes. A lot of times we don't get very or any notification that that's happening, and that's why we have a support team to try to move quickly to help. But the 2028 is not a definitive end date, but what we expect to see, and we're already starting to see, is the amount of investment that Microsoft is making within the GP space is decreasing. So at Directions this year, for instance, I saw a number of people who were historically in Fargo on working for Microsoft at other companies, so either an ISV or a VAR. So there is and some of those people in the Microsoft realm have moved over to Business Central and are supporting both GP and Business Central within those teams. So we are seeing some signs of decreased investment in the GP world for Microsoft. But again, nothing that says you have to move. So I did want to talk about the modern lifecycle. So to align with their cloud releases, and we're seeing this with other uh, on-premise software, that their on-premise releases are beginning to mimic some of their uh, online releases. And so this October timeline, this is when one of the times when we see Business Central in particular, but other applications like Power Platform. This is when lots of applications are getting their updates so that they can align with each other for releases. This is a big update for. This is tends to be the new capability update for GP. How big it is, obviously depends on their backlog and how much they're able to get through. And then, other important releases are around tax, as those of you know, getting those tax updates. Um, we've got to schedule those. Um, so, so what does that mean? They are say the advice on the modern life cycle. So when you go from 2018 to an 18 dot something, so they changed their numbering after 2018, and all the updates afterwards were 18.2, 18.3. We're currently on 18.4. We'll see 18.5. So when you're on an 18.x release, then to stay in mainstream support, you need to be updating every year. The updates are going faster than they used to be. So that's something that has helped both us and you for updates. And then Kopis is essentially trying to work with our clients who can do things like in-place upgrades to shorten the cycle on these updates. So historically, we've done and we'll continue to do with companies who either have policies or maybe don't have the snapshotting capabilities or some kind of rollback capabilities that would prevent us from doing this. But essentially, we would historically clone production into a test environment, run the update there, do all our data validation, user acceptance testing, and then essentially go and do that again in production. We're essentially doing that in one step where in cases where we can have a proper rollback procedure, like say a VM snapshot of both GP and database server, then we can essentially do that update, work with you on data validation and testing all in production, and then go live, knowing that if something were to go wrong during that in place upgrade, we could always roll back to the snapshot.
And
That's
Adam, we had
one.
a
Oh,
Adam,
yeah.
we had a question that came in from Robin, who asked if we're using GP 2015, we're not getting the updates you speak of on this slide, correct?
2015, they're not the modern life cycle, correct? That's the fixed life cycle.
Perfect, thank you. And just as a reminder to any of the folks that joined us a little bit late, feel free to type in any of your questions into the chat and we'll respond to those. Or if you want to unmute yourself and use the reactions button to raise your hand, we can address you then too. I'll give it back to you, Adam.
Sure. Thanks. So this would be, and we'd love to for those that want to get on that yearly upgrade path and minimize both the impact to your organization as well as the cost of doing those upgrades, we can definitely strategize with you on making sure we have the right infrastructure in place for snapshotting and all the nitty gritty around doing this safely. There will be some scenarios that either you or we collectively don't feel comfortable that we have the right things in place, or there's going to be procedural or policy constraints, maybe regulatory or whatever, that may prevent us from doing that. And we can strategize on what the acceptable level of risk and things like that for how we want to do upgrades with you. We're happy to strategize on that. We're not. I just tell you, we're not in the business to get rich off of upgrades. We want to make this as seamless and as easy and cost effective for you as possible. I think we'd all rather spend our time strategizing on how you can grow your business, and how we can help there. That's our philosophy on upgrades. What are we seeing in the GP infrastructure space? This is probably something that's pretty obvious, but almost all new infrastructure is virtual. It's even if it is, uh, you know, somebody buying, large server infrastructure to host virtual machines locally or in a local data center. Almost everything at these days is virtual. We're still seeing that SQL 2014 is supported even with the modern lifecycle. So that's been helpful for many of our upgrades recently. We're not seeing a requirement to go to a newer SQL version. That's definitely reduced some pressure from a SQL licensing perspective. Um, and then we're beginning to see more organizations host in Azure, predominantly for some of the um, high availability. It's a little bit easier to architecture high availability. Azure in general, if you're just doing a server cost comparison, is going to tend to be a little bit more expensive. But typically you'd need to consider the cost of labor for managing local hardware and things like that. And that's certainly something we can help advise, but that's something that certainly the organizations have great support in. If you do RDS, the one little bit odd thing in the Azure world is you still have to buy user client access licenses, user CALs, for those terminal servers. They're not provided, to my knowledge, they're not provided by any type of Azure SKUs, but it is easier to just simply buy like a VM with SQL Server as part of the SKU infrastructure with Azure, the consumption.
Adam, we had one question that came in at registration that asked, is Microsoft strongly suggesting that we move away from on-prem installations to using GP in the cloud?
I would say that they are interested in their top choice, their top preference would be that GP organizations move to Business Central. Then they, I'd say their next, this is me speaking selfishly for Microsoft, selfish from their perspective. They'd like for organizations who aren't going to move to a software as a service to host in Azure. That'd be their desire. Whether that's right for you or not, I mean that's a business decision for yourself. There are certainly a lot of benefits to hosting in Azure. I've mentioned a few of those, um, and then certainly other reasons why not to do it as well. So I don't know if that completely answered your question, but let's see. Let me make sure check my notes. So, oh, one other thing I was going to mention about Azure hosting that is interesting is um, you can actually clone some of these. So if you set up your constellation of servers for GP, one really cool thing about uh, about Azure, and is that you can clone those resource groups, and then uh, your means for refreshing your test environment or having a test environment uh, open up pretty dramatically, including only paying for the consumption that you need. So let's say you have a pretty large footprint and you absolutely have to test your all your scenarios for doing upgrades. You could clone your environment. You could have it only running during the time of testing, and then spin the whole thing down once you're done with your testing, only to be spun up once you're ready to do other testing. So there are some interesting things that the consumption model can change the game for you, because obviously in the scenario where you have your physical hardware to support that virtual infrastructure, you have to buy for the capacity, the top capacity that you need, where Azure's a limited capacity, but you're only paying for consumption. So I mentioned a little bit about what Microsoft is delivering in the GP space. I'll reiterate some of that and go to a little bit more detail. We're seeing predominantly small incremental improvements. We can share the 18.x release notes for those that want to look for anything that might be a reason why they want to go into that. I'd say in general, it's predominantly maintaining the status quo. It's ensuring compatibility with the changes in the Office and the online Power Platform, Exchange Online landscape. Those are the predominant things that we're seeing that's being delivered to GP in those feature updates. Um, our ISV partners are still supporting GP. They're all releasing well for these 18.x releases. For the most part, we haven't seen too many delays. So upgrades have been pretty smooth with regard to our ISVs. I think we've had one or two slow releases, but for the most part, it's been pretty good. Um, the interesting thing about the ISVs are the add-ons to GPs, so independent software vendor. Back to our acronyms. So our add-ons to GP, Nav and SL all had an ecosystem of add-ons as well, with Business Central being the predominant place for continued investment, both from the Microsoft perspective, but also in some ISVs. I think we have some partners who are putting a little bit more investment into their products to help GP clients continue to stay longer on the platform. But you actually have an interesting convergence of add-ons from these three different ERP platforms targeting Business Central as their next gen platform. So we're seeing a lot of the GP add-ons released now for Business Central, and same with SL, same with Nav. Nav was a little bit easier path for them because the programming model didn't change very much. But it's actually creating a lot more competition in the add-on space, and each of those ERP uh, platforms had a slightly different philosophy, and so it's creating a really robust ecosystem where in the GP space, add-ons were a little bit more popular. And so there was less customization in the GP space. Nav was a little bit more historically customized. And so you just had just kind of a different flavor. And you're seeing that still as these add-ons mature within the Business Central platform. So with these GP moves to Business Central, as well as the continued development in the GP space itself, they're well established brands, and they've put a lot of investment into these add-ons, so they know their space really well. So I mentioned, kind of some key pieces about staying on GP. Modern lifecycle is probably the biggest one. Um, the other I would say is is just the day and the age that we live in. With with GP being an on-premise database-driven application, it's certainly a target for malware and specifically crypto. So, you know, having your security policies refreshed and training users on ensuring they're not clicking things, because let's be honest, we as humans are the weakest link when it comes to security. Um, and it's unfortunately all too easy to have scenarios where backups are stored on the same server that the database is on, and then if you get a encryption attack, then the entire VM is encrypted, and you don't have backups. So I'd certainly recommend, if you haven't already, make sure you talk to your IT provider about, and we're happy to help with those conversations about how backups are being done, and you disaster recovery policy. With the Business Central world, it's a little bit different. It's on Azure SQL. So those are 30-day point in time recovery, which is kind of nice from an out of the box perspective. You can certainly do more in the GP hosted in Azure scenario. You can certainly configure those geo redundant backups and having high availability and things like that can reduce your risk there as well. And there's more certainly a more of a encouragement in things like multi-factor authentication and things like that. So, what is Kopis doing to continue to help clients who want to stay on GP, or strategize for that move later on? One of our core values is impact. As much as we all love software at this organization, if we're not doing it to be impactful for our clients, then we're not doing it right. So like I said at the beginning, we want to support our clients on whatever their chosen path is. So if that is staying on GP as long as you can to maximize that initial investment you made, we're there to help you. And if that is, I need to move now because that's the path that our organization has chosen, that's fine too. We're happy to help. For those that want to stay on GP longer, kind of the biggest thing that any partner faces these days is continued access to GP talent. As you know, with Darlene's departure, we made a relationship with a partner that does help us on the support side. So we have access to a pretty deep bench of both support GP individuals, as well as our uh, you know our stalwarts, Nancy and Tony, as project consultants. We have access to more GP project consultants through that relationship and some others as well. So we'll continue to make sure that we have access to GP talent to support our customers. Um, as far as other things, one of the things that we've continued to look at is how can, while we may have said we want to stay on GP as an organization, um, but how could I continue to leverage other pieces of the Microsoft platform? Uh, the one thing that we see as the obvious choice for our GP clients is the Microsoft Power Platform. Power Platform is a larger ecosystem of um, business intelligence tools, so Power BI, workflow tools, Power Automate, and application building tools, Power Apps. So those three tools can be integrated with GP, and we can push and pull data From the GP application, you can create custom applications that ultimately land in GP or read data from GP. And so there's some very interesting kind of configurations to continue to use that and extend the life of GP using the Power Platform. In particular, we developed a, Power BI starter pack for GP, where we have some dashboards that are designed to read the GP tables and provide data in a visual format and kind of be that launch pad for utilizing Power BI across your organization, if that's a good fit for you. Other things that we're seeing in the space, in particular, with uh, since 2020, AP automation, and then changes to how you transact electronically. Um, Notice in particular has those two have probably been the most common enhancements across the board. We work with a number of AP automation providers because all of them have kind of made their own flavor of AP automation. Some are focused on handling the payables, and some are focused on workflow in particular. All of them tend to have good OCR capabilities, but they all kind of fit a little bit different markets. With PCI compliance. And what we're seeing in this space, and notice is no example, many of the payment applications, both here in the GP space, but also in the Business Central space, have all been purchased by merchant processors. So typically, so those of you maybe using older versions of Notice, upgrading to PayFac for PCI compliance, but generally you also have the opportunity to look at their merchant processor. Doing both of those can sometimes we've seen with one client recently there was a pretty significant savings as they are certainly offering the best uh, um, fee structure to their clients. So that's something that we've been seeing more use of FastPath in the space. Some for the compliance aspect, some for integration with Active Directory. So those are the two things that we've seen. And then I mentioned earlier Power BI. That's probably of all the things in the Power Platform, Power BI is the most obvious choice. I use it every day, connected to Business Central. No reason why you can't do that with GP. So to conclude, if there we're happy to schedule sessions with anyone, whether that's about maximizing your time on GP, starting to investigate a move, or no, hey, we really want to move soon. All of those are on the table. We're happy to help in any way we can. We will have another webinar kind of describing what it's like to move from GP to Business Central. So we'll have some examples of that and some of the process that we've used to move organizations from GP to Business Central. But we're happy to love to speak with you and learn about what's going on in your organization and how we can help.